there could be a time when we're finished changing all of this, that the parent portal would automatically be able to be used on the elementary level. But we needed to reduce the number of systems teachers needed to log into. So, because White Hammer was a freestanding product, and we needed to be able to tie our classes to the schedule we were now required to create for the elementary school, we moved to the report card, and the teachers had to be trained in the use and the management of that new report card also this fall. All the data, I think Kathy mentioned it, all the data that is in for state testing for students needs to be verified. All teachers in the district need to verify their class lists because the state is doing something behind the scenes. Much of it we don't know, but I know it's capturing this information for some reason. So they need to be trained how to go to that system to verify their class lists, and that's where they can go to make sure that everything is correct. So they need to learn how to do that. So that's the data systems. So in addition to that, we need to report a tremendous amount of data to the state education department all through the year. We actually just had to do a report, a federal report that we never had to do before that took from the end of August until now to fill out and upload. The testing information gets uploaded. There's something called level 0 where all our testing information is, and then we have to verify and it gets sent up to them. The attendance is now done there as well. So that also took our information specialist a tremendous amount of trips to the RIC and to learn the new rules about attendance and reporting information. We had to facilitate technology purchases in order to maintain functionality. What that really means is, if we got lazy about following our tech plan, which refreshes each building in a timely rotation, we would be in a position where we would be told by the state, for example, that let's say they come through with the park testing in the next 4 years. We would need to be able to test every child on a computer. That would be, if you think maps was a scheduling nightmare, that would be a scheduling nightmare. At the very least, what we have to do is make sure that, for 2 reasons. One, for the potential for the testing. But 2 is, people at home are changing their technology faster than ever. It is not sensible to maintain technology that is 3 and 4 years, sometimes 5 and 6 years, behind the technology that the students are using outside of school. We can't teach them how to do things on machines that can't do what they can do when they go home. The good news is the world is moving to more and more web-based. We have the potential of the maps testing not being local client, but being web-based, as it is so many other things. But we still need to pay attention to the quality of our technology. And we also have to continue to negotiate and fight for with our BOCES to continue to update the bandwidth, because as our use of web-based products increases, the size of our bandwidth must increase. So we're trying to stay ahead and not get, caught behind the eight ball in that regard, because that could be a difficult financial position to be in.
Well, this is when things don't get so sunny. The new attendance and report card system that we're using in the elementary is really putting a round peg in a square hole, because what we have to do is we have to take attendance every period. It's often not, you're in ELA, but it's, you're missing part of math. I have probably in the course of a week, probably over 55 kids that leave my class, whether it be speech, OT, PT, ESL, I have special needs kids, they leave for all different types of reasons. So we have to be able to put in what they're missing during the day so that we don't have those minutes in our classroom, which makes it really difficult because it's not really clean. You know, I'll have a morning meeting where we're doing math, we're doing ELA, we're doing reading a story. Now, do I put that into math? Do I put that into ELA? Am I reading a story about something that's related to our science unit, would it be under science? So that's where it gets kind of sticky. Kathy Hoey has been wonderful in trying to get that to all work out for us, but, you know, it's hard to be able to do that because it's really, upper level model, but we're trying to push ourselves into that, which is very difficult. Same goes for the report cards. It's based on classes. When we did our report cards, some of the things that we had in our old report card was we were unable to replicate on new report card. At the kindergarten level, which I can speak for, was you have to know every color, every letter, every sound, every shape, everything. You have to check off each individual box. Well, they were unable to replicate that on the new report card. So now we have a separate sheet that we have to report that to parents, because those are big skills that we need to be able to report for the parents on the report card. The way it was set up in the past, we were able to look at the previous quarter's report card grades and be able to use those to help us to assess how we're doing, how the child is moving up. Now we're no longer able to do that in a certain view. It's just a little bit more challenging for us because we had to do a little bit more training. It's not a clean report card for the elementary school, but again, this is nothing from the district. It's really requiring, the state mandates and how we have to keep everything on the e-school product. But that's been a challenge. That definitely has been a challenge. But we got trained, and the first report card was good. But in the first report card, we generally do not do comments. And the second report card, we know we have like 100 characters. So for me, it's going to be kind of hard to stop my talking. And in the last area, there isn't unlimited. But in the other report card, I think it's a drop-down comments, but we write our own. So there's some adjustments that we have to make, but we'll get to that. Thank you.
One of the questions. One thing that you mentioned, why maps may not be as useful at the high school. I'm not sure we defined the reason, but the amount of advancement at that level is percentages, portions of a percent, yeah.
When we're talking about specifically the science, they're not sure about how we feel about the math. It should go, let's go to some grade, doesn't it, math? Yes. Yeah, ELA and math goes up. That's really what the state's focusing on. But we are using the science 6. We did use it for 6, 10. We're looking at, again, this is now that the SLOs are kind of out of the way a little bit, and once they prove the APPR, we'll be able to turn our attention into specifically, if we're not going to use that assessment, we're going to have to develop those assessments, and that's what our teachers are prepared to do.
So, I took this from BOCES, and with them, it was all the services that BOCES offered for these different pieces, and I just said, wow, we offer that many services, there's got to be a lot at the other end. And I think you all spoke to it as the key in my mind is the time frame. If this were rolled out over 3 years, yeah, and even the state then might even have some ideas of what to expect instead of us trying to invent it for them, which is basically the way this is opted out, where in the past the state usually has the rubrics or something to go off of. And now every school district independently is working kind of in the dark, hoping to come up with what the state's looking for. But that's 1 year, you had to negotiate, you had to write it, you had to figure out, you had to adopt a test, you got to roll it out, you got to train, you've got to use it, and you've got to evaluate on it. And none of that has to do with figuring out Common Core, which is another thing rolled out nearly simultaneously. So it's just been a heck of a couple of years. I always thought each year they couldn't outdo themselves, but they've done it. And it's very difficult. It's one of the things that my work is resilient, adaptable. Well, I guess everybody's learned to do that. But it creates a lot of tension because nobody's really sure of what the test looks like. How am I going to get evaluated? How are they going to rate me? you know, how much time is it gonna take? And how much state aid do we get for this? Oh, nothing, okay.
Well, no, we actually got raised to the top funds of approximately $9,500 over 4 years. So,
And that doesn't count the cost to keep track of that, which if you net it out, is probably next to nothing. So yeah, it's just, and like you say, it's all for the right reason, just too quick and all at once. Again, spread out would have made life a lot easier. It is what it is, and we're gonna try and do it the best we can. And as we go in the future, we'll keep modifying and tweaking to try and get the best answer for us.
and we've kind of talked about this before too, but, you know, with all the stress that it puts on the teachers and the principals, obviously there's an impact on the kids too. I mean, it's not just taking tests, but I'm sure they feel the stress and they feel the tension, you know, so it's not as if it goes unfelt by kids that we're trying to serve.
Do the SLOs that the teachers create, do they have to be approved by the state?
The SLOs have to be, in our district, the SLOs are developed between the principal and the teacher, and they are approved by the superintendent, who is acting for the state.
The maps I know are done 3 times a year. The other tests, like in the middle school or the high school, where they have the BOCES tests that are science or social studies, are they just twice a year?
Yes.
The ones that were developed in our BOCES, there was a pre-test that was developed and a post-test. The ones that came from Herkimer were developed as a final assessment, and so that the pre-tests were 3 data points, and the people, I think, here used the maps as their baseline. So that's kind of flexible.
Now, have we figured out, or is there a way to figure out, and is it worth figuring out how much all of these mandates cost, and letting the state know, or doing something about it? How do we?
Lower Hudson has been doing that. There was a white paper published by them recently and given out at the testing meeting. It's on the website. It speaks to some of the AR costs. We're going to mention a little bit about it today too. You know, part of the problem is that different people are giving different figures because some are counting man hours, some aren't, you know. So it's hard to compare apples and apples sometimes because there's not like one survey coming from the state that asks the question in the same way that everybody can fill out and submit. But we have an idea certainly.
Well, I mean, you would have to think about, does it count to you that on 8 days I was in Albany, not doing the RTI manual or not doing whatever else is my regular day job? And so does that count as money? You know,
And
do
then
you,
turn it around and essentially using that same information to train all of the administrators so that it was in a sense double duty.
right, because then I would have to, one of the reasons we did it that way was because when you get training from the state, it's talking to the whole state. So I would come back and I know our people, so I know what they know and I know what they don't know. So I would distill the training so that they didn't have to, I mean, up at state aid, you go from 8 in the morning until 9 at night, no kidding. And so there's no reason for our people to have to sit through that length of time. So I would distill and prepare the training that was really tailored for our principals.
Plus, the principals would have been out of the building those days too, which would have been even worse than Jill being out of the district.
Moving on.
In an economics class, this would be your opportunity cost. No, I'm not kidding. This is what it is. It's your opportunity cost. What have you lost? And that is really the big problem here, is by dumping this all at the same time, it's your opportunity cost. It's all the things that aren't getting done because of it. And it's hard to quantify what that is. You can sit down and say, all right, this is how much we're paying for maps, and this is how much we paid subs, and this is how much more bandwidth is costing us, and you can do all that. But the reality is, it is those opportunity costs. It's the fact that I don't have as many kids staying after to work on their essays for me, you know? I mean, in some ways that angers me more than any of it. But that's the problem, is, Dr. Powell's right, it's hard to quantify that stuff, and how do you quantify it? So,
What I can tell you for sure is the state put out a questionnaire. Do you know about this? They're considering, for those of you who have been in American education for a while, whether or not to separate the global studies assessment into a 2-year course. Did you do that?
no, I can't say as much as it.
In addition, we had someone come down to work with our esteemed math department. If you remember, it used to be, I don't know, algebra, geometry, and whatever. Then it was course 1, course 2, course 3. Then it was math A, math B, math C. That was all like in 5 years. So now,
Well, it's integrated algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 and trig right now. but
except
they're
that you
changing-
don't know what to
We don't know
teach.
what's in there
Right.
next year.
So we hired the guy who sits at state ed and gets the training and has he's like the pipeline to state ed to come down and work with them, and he told them,
I don't know.
so high school math is going to be in the same position it's been in for the past, period of time. They're tinkering with social studies, so they're, I think, I'm not sure whether I think that they're going to go down to K-1, 2 before they go up to 9, 12.
And if I may, I mean, I'm a little cynical, maybe it's because I'm strategic, but, I laugh at the fact that there used to be an 8th grade state social studies assessment that they got rid of because they blatantly told us we don't have the money for that. But now you're going to have an 8th grade social studies assessment that we're going to get out of Herkimer that, correct me if I'm wrong, but gets paid for, but, right, the district paid for that assessment. So now here's an assessment that they've essentially shifted the cost from state ed to the districts. And that's just one I can think of that they've done, I don't know on purpose, but I think at one point somebody up there may actually be smart enough to go, hey, look, we saved some money. And we were able to shift costs, which has been their MO for a while. So I just think that's one of the things you have to really have to worry about, is that it's another, I mean, it's their mandates already, but now they won't even give you the test, you'll have to buy the test. Sorry,
Editorial.
editorial.
Anyone else?
I just want to ask, how are we feeling about the math testing itself? Are we feeling that this is going to be a good tool, or we should wait till after January or February and see where we're at with this?
It depends. I think it changes over the grades. I think elementary probably likes it a lot more than high school does. A high school teacher, I mean, just because of the nature of the kids, they're not going to, you're going to see, ooh, we saw a half a point of growth. Well, that doesn't really get you all excited, As opposed to an elementary teacher who can see this huge jump in what the kids do. The middle school is, oddly enough, right in the middle of that, depending on how it works. I mean, I think it might be a little, at least for me, it might be a little bit too early to say. We've had one test of it so far. I think if we could find an easier way to schedule it and implement it, and I know Mr. Murphy in the middle school has looked at that, it could be valuable. I mean, I think it will be valuable, especially in the elementary school, especially for ELA and math. As a social studies teacher, we don't have a math social studies, so it's kind of hard for me to say for myself. But you can see what the kids get, what they don't get, where the trends are. So it does inform your instruction in that sense.
Even 9th and 10th grade has value. If I was teaching math, I think it would have very good value because it does break down exactly what they need to work on and what they're weak in. It's when you hit the 11th and 12th grade, when you're teaching like a pre-calculus, it's not as much of a valuable tool anymore. The growth they're going to get on a math test is going to be, if you're lucky, half a point, but I'm teaching them so much more. It's just that amount of content is no longer in that math exam. Plus, they do not have enough 12th graders taking it so that they can give you norms to even know what the standard rate of improvement is. So, but I can definitely, my 9th and my 10th graders, there is a value to it. My 11th and 12th, it's a little harder to say.
Now, is the effect also at the elementary level that we had at Todd, or losing that one class?
Well, let's,
essentially
we
a
know,
full week?
I think Dr. Cecile scheduled about 45 minutes. We can get the test done in kindergarten in about 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And, the disadvantage is, at least at my level, is that when the kids go in there, in September at 4 and 5 years old, there's some that really can't even control the mouse. So, I mean, I had one child that just clicked and watched the circle every single one, and circle, and then finally they go on. So we know that that is not a valid assessment for that particular child. So, although they have those challenges up at the top, sit long enough without looking up saying, am I done? And you're like, 4 more questions, you know, and then they just want to go on. So we hope that the growth is going to be.
And when Jill was talking about the change in technology, one of the teachers whose daughter is in 1st grade sat down to do the test, and she didn't know how to use a mouse because they've got an iPad. She's sitting there, watching the screen. This isn't working, right? So, I mean, but that's the kind of thing that these kids have. That's the norm for them. So the idea of updating technology, which is a cost, I get it, but that's going to be, that's going to be one of the things that's always going to be an issue.
And another thing was that many of the students, at least in my class, when they got out of it, they're used to having these drill and practice type of things that they get some kind of feedback after every answer. So they came out thinking they got every single question right, because they never got the, or the, I got every single one right. So, which was great for me because then they feel successful, of course. And I don't think everyone got everything right, but that's different than what
But
they
in high
used
school,
to.
they wanted to know what they got right and what they got wrong. They were annoyed at the end because they got a score and they had no idea what about the end, and they didn't know what questions they got
I
right.
had one student who took the most time he possibly could because he was trying to beat the test. I know, he was trying to beat, and because the test adapts and would keep giving him more and more difficult things, and he's very driven and he wants to beat the test, and it was out of my class, and I'm like, where is he? You've all been back for 20 minutes, where is he? Because he's trying to beat the test. So, I mean, in some ways that's great, but in other ways it's, get back in my class. So, it just lends itself to
I'm
it.
sorry. How do you deal with a kindergartner then if he doesn't know how to do it?
Well,
I
we
mean, how
practiced.
do you get valid data?
Well,
from
the
that
first
child?
test, we did have, we used the smartboard and we showed them how to do it initially. So they had to know where, because they can't read, of course, many of them. So even clicking go on, they had to be able to be taught where that button was on the screen, but they had to continue to go to the next question, because we're really not supposed to give them any assistance during that, at least we can't. There's some aides that are in there that can. We also had it used as a center for a couple of days, that they had a practice, practice test that they did on the computers in the classroom, so that they can continue to practice how to use the mouse. And it was like, third week in September, so they probably did have some experience with the mouse. I didn't have anyone that couldn't use the mouse. There was just some that were not as coordinated as others using it, and they just took a little bit longer. But by the 4th test, by the time we had the 4th test of the series, it was fun.
But it is valid because of the pool of all of the, is it more than 20,000, right? To be the, it has to be 20,000 in order for that data to be used. So I'm sure that if there is a student who didn't ace the mouse, there is one somewhere else who didn't ace the mouse.
Which will just mean that they will score much better, which was great for us. So,
That's what you want to do, not teach them how to.
Stay away from the mouse.
that was great.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And I think, as John Farrell said, it sounds like they might have been up here wanting, but that really wasn't the intent in any way. It was really just to give you a picture of what it's like day to day in terms of what they're all facing. And I have to tell you, they've been exceptionally positive through all of this in terms of making the most out of the difficult situation. So thank you again for participating in this presentation. Ready for the boardroom presentation?
Mr. President, out of respect for these bus drivers, I've been to bus drivers here that wanted to see, one of the bus drivers have to get up at 4:30 in the morning. If you could move to that before your presentation, if you don't mind. Only going to be about 10 minutes or so.
Any objection to the board?
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Thank you for, I assume this is where I'm going to speak from. Thank you for the opportunity to address this board tonight. My name is Adrian Hoffman, I'm the principal officer of Teamsters Local 445. We are the union that represents the 170 bus drivers and monitors for ground transport services. As you may be aware, Durham is the contractor that transports your children to and from school, also Rhinebeck and such as Wilson. Recently, the workers at Durham, by a 98% margin, voted to and are prepared to strike. Because of this board asking us to meet with you, we postponed that vote. Tonight, you're going to hear from several of the workers from Durham, along with the union representative, Lori Powell, who, by the way, has 10 years' experience driving a school bus. You'll also hear from our International Strategic Campaign Department to talk about the safety record of Durham. So the first to speak is Chuck. Oh, I'm sorry, Eva.
Hi, I'm Eva Young. I'm a bus driver for Durham. I've been a bus driver for a total of 12 years, 3 years at Durham. My main issue is I drive for St. Francis Preschool. I have 3 3-year-olds on my bus. They're just little guys, little tiny kids. They all have to be in a car seat. I had 3 car seats that I got from Durham, put them on my bus. I couldn't get them tight enough so that they wouldn't move. I asked another bus driver to help me, see if she could get them tightened so that they wouldn't move. It's not safe for them to move. She couldn't get them tightened. One of the straps was broken on one of the seats, on one of the car seats. It was very unsafe. So what I did was I took it upon myself to go to the fire department, to a professional who knew how to install the car seats to see if he could get them tight enough for me so that they wouldn't move. He looked at the seats and he said, these seats, excuse me, but he said they're shit. I gotta throw them out, they're too old, they won't work, it's dangerous. I can't even let you leave with these seats. We had to throw them out and give them new seats. At no cost to Durham, he couldn't let me leave, so he had to give me 3 brand new seats. He tightened them in for me. The seats are good to go. Durham didn't have any other seats. I don't even know if they're getting any new car seats in. They say they're working on it. It's really upset. I have an 8-year-old son. If I had to put my son in one of those seats, I would make him really mad. And one of the parents did make a complaint. I don't know what about it, if anything. There's another issue. I've been working there for 3 years. I worked at First Student 9 years. First Student pounded into us safety. Safety meetings. We had to, we had to have a 19A person get on our bus. Why did this? We had tested. We had to drag a bag full of barbells to make sure that we could, in case there was an emergency on the bus. I haven't had that in 3 years at Durham. I should have had that by now. I should have had that in the first year. The training that we're supposed to have once a month, they let us know on the day's notice that we're going to have training the next day. It should be every month. I don't think we've had a training every month this year, this school year. But I don't know. I think, I just think that the safety of the children, and I know Spackenkill doesn't have any little kids in car seats, but I do on my bus, and I know that there's a lot of other bus drivers are having the same problem. The car seats are important. It's not only is it for the safety of the kids, but if I got stopped, I would be the one responsible and probably be charged for endangering the welfare of a child or whatever the charge would be. But I just wanted you guys to all hear that. And I thank you for the opportunity to letting us speak.
Can you hear me? Thank you for letting us speak and represent our cause. I've been driving for Durham for about 13 months. And I got to Highland School District 10 years ago, and I have about 4 years' experience. And the turnover rate, I just want to say, I just hired 13 months ago, 30 people below me fixed. It's, to me, it's a reflection of substandard salary. It's an issue, and we feel it needs to be addressed. Basically, that's all I wanted to say, except that there's three things that we need. We need safety above all for the students. We need our dignity, and we need livable wage. And that's why we're here. Thank you.
I'm gonna need a mic, so I'm gonna stand back here. I'm loud enough without it. My name's Maureen. I'm a monitor as well as a trainer for Girls School Services. I've been there a little over 4 years. My only really concern is the training process itself. It is getting better, but there's things we need to work on. When I started 4 years ago, there was no monitor training. The program was created with myself and some other monitors as well as a manager that's no longer here. Today, that program is working well. When we get to use it. There was a point for about a year where we didn't use that training system because we weren't allowed to in our budget. That has been remedied, but it is an issue still with the training process itself, with getting monitors in and trained in a timely fashion. I don't know how to fix that actually, but we are working on it. And again, it's important to say that there was no process because you are transporting your children, your daughters, sons, nieces, nephews, cousins, whatever you want to call it. And not having that training for special needs children puts us at our largest disadvantage. We don't know how to handle those situations with those children that are autistic or whatever they may be. So that's my message to you is to just know about that. We don't have that training as much as we should. Thank you for your time and listening and let us know.
My name is Laura Tulsa. I'm a business agent from Teamsters Local 415. I represent the dedicated drivers and monitors from Durham School Services, as well as over 600 bus drivers and monitors from other transportation companies. I'm a former school bus driver from First Student, and I've worked in the transportation of children for nearly 10 years. I can't stress enough the amount of responsibility these men and women have when they step on the driver's seat. They're carrying our future, the most prized possession of every mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, our children. Many of them with special needs who depend on and trust us to protect them. The school bus is an extension of the classroom. Their driver is the first smiling face they see every morning and the last one to say goodbye, see you tomorrow. As a school bus worker, you form a relationship with every child on your bus, and you take the responsibility very seriously. I felt it was my obligation to reach out to you tonight with my concerns about the practices of the transportation contractor this district spends its taxpayers' money on to transport their children. By awarding work to the lowest bidder, like many contractors, you get what you pay for. In my experience, this contractor demonstrates the lowest standards I've seen in the industry. With a 40% turnover rate, they can't keep employees due to their low wages and poor standards. Children need consistency and a district needs reliability. Neither of these are being provided. I believe even a supervisor from this district had to step in and drive a bus on more than one occasion when the contractor couldn't fulfill their obligation to the contract. There are strict state and federal laws in place that mandate the requirements of school bus drivers and monitors, and I was shocked to hear the reckless decision this contractor makes by putting profit over safety. We're told new drivers have been sent out on buses without the required pre-service training, without a background check or fingerprints. There are drivers that have been taken out the bus to observe their driving skills or shown how to do a pre-trip on the bus. They hand them the keys and off they go. This is unconscionable. These people aren't going out picking up garbage and picking up children. This contractor continually sends buses out without the required monitors for special needs children that the district is paying them for. When I questioned the last manager about this, they've had 4 managers in 3 years. His response was, yeah, we got away with that one. They just don't care. There have been no safety meetings beyond the state required 2 meetings a year in the past, no continuous training and development. It's a bare bones operation. They won't even provide a roll of paper towels on the buses for cleanup if a child gets sick or the driver's windshield comes up. To make profit at the expense of low wages and safety is inexcusable. These children deserve better. We ask that you hold this contractor accountable and support our effort to raise their standards. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I want to thank you for granting us time early. I know you got a lot of important business, but as Principal Officer Huff said, that it's very important that these folks get a decent night's sleep. My name is Carl Stan. I work for the International Union, and Local 445 asked me to come here to talk about what we know as an international union about Durham. We represent more than 5,000 drivers across the country who work for Durham School Services. You may know that they're based in the UK, and they have extensive operations throughout North America. Basically, what we've observed, and it's different than other companies such as First Student, is that they cut corners wherever they can. You've heard talk about sending drivers out before they've even been fingerprinted, let alone the background check coming back with the results. They've gone out before they've even been fingerprinted. That's a liability for the company, but it's a liability for the district as well. The safety issues are rampant here, and we've heard about that across the country. Whether it's broken radios, exposed wires, leaking windows, these things are, just the fact that they don't clean the buses regularly has been an ongoing problem with this company. They're really just trying to cut corners, and it's at the communities and the children's cost, right? So I want to be quick, but I want to talk about the fact that monitors aren't always going out on runs. I don't know the specifics. I haven't seen the contract that you have with Durham and what enforcement mechanisms you have to hold them and what the requirements are about monitors in each bus. But I encourage you to enforce that because if they can save money by not sending out monitors on a run, they'll do that. If the driver's absent and they can combine runs, they'll do that. And that's stuff that you're paying for. And it creates havoc in the schedule because the students aren't picked up or delivered on time. There was an incident in St. Charles, Illinois that I want to draw your attention to. When monitors aren't on buses, there was a girl that was severely beaten up by other students. And although that case hasn't been finalized, what the result was that it wasn't just the company, it wasn't just Durham that was dragged into court, it was the district that was dragged into court. So I just want to alert you to the fact that this is going on. As Adrian said, there's a contract being negotiated right now that is very important and has consequences for the district, and these safety issues need to be addressed. We want to put it in front of you. We heard, with the presentation earlier, we heard, a great example of union working with the district, for concern about the community, and we'd like that to be the case here. So in conclusion, again, I want to thank you. I want to encourage you, the International Union has a website that I encourage you to go to. It's called Durham School Services 101. I think it's actually .com, not .org, but it's DurhamSchoolServices101.com. I encourage you to go on there. There's other examples of how they've been a bad actor in cutting corners. I also want to encourage you to communicate regularly with Adrian and Lori about the status of negotiations. They currently have an information request in about background checks to see from the company what the records are. And then I just want to encourage you to diligently enforce and regulate the contract that you have with Durham. So in conclusion, thank you very much.
Thank you. 1 minute. Okay, already went 15.
Okay, I'm sorry. Listen, you can't put a time limit on safety, and this is what this struggle is about. I think we've proven tonight, just a hint of it, that this contractor is, although they may be the least expensive, they're not the most responsible contractor. there are several people that left early, one person that left 2 weeks without a monitor, 6 children on his bus, going down to Westchester, 2-hour ride down and 2 hours back. Had one of the oldest buses in the fleet, broke down. What does that driver do? Hard enough just to drive, and now you're broke down on the side of the road waiting for somebody to come and fix that bike with 6 children. Listen, I have 1 grandchild, and I got all I can do to handle that. So I can imagine what 6 are like. We had another driver that was going to speak tonight. And he said 4 days. They put him out in the bus. After the 4 days, they fingerprint him. That's no way to run an airplane, let alone transport your children that you're responsible for. I would request that this board send a monitor over to watch over your contract, to watch over your children. The children of this district deserve that, deserve better than that. I thank you. I'll be around after this, so if anybody has questions.
The big finale this evening is a financial update, basically the current financial status of the district, as well as a little bit of a historical view and a very brief look to the future. Michelle will begin, and I will jump in.
Having just come back from Albany, I feel like I remember after our last day there, after 3 days of workshops, that you get the, ad and the stick, and you get like the presentation after lunch and the last afternoon, and so I'm trying to keep it a little bit interesting. First, we're going to take a look at some of the current financial issues for 2013-14 and some facts on it. Our state aid, the largest piece of state aid that we receive is in the form of foundation aid. Back in 2008-2009, law was put into place that would really benefit school districts, and that we would be able to project out what our foundation aid would be out into the future. So we would be guaranteed an amount of aid every year that we could count on. Well, that happened for 1 year. It happened in 2008-2009, and a recession hit. Currently for this year, and that formula stayed in place, we should be receiving $7.5 million in aid for this year. Currently, we're receiving 4.7, or a shortfall of $2.75 million. Now, this past year, we've gotten a little bit of extra money for 12-13. We're not exactly sure yet how much we're getting for 12-13 because we're changing formulas as we speak. But if what they just gave us this year were to go out several years in the future, it would take us 58 years to do 58 that we should have gotten our year. Gap elimination adjustment, what that was is it was an elimination of the deficit at the state level. It was detrimental to us as school district. In 11-12, the gap elimination adjustment, which was a decrease in aid to us, was $1.4 million. For 12-13, they decreased how much they were going to take away from us to $1.38 million. For us to be fully restored at that rate, it would take 31 years to do so. So our total state aid and federal aid losses from 10-11, 12-13, from those 3 periods of time, just for Spackenkill is $4.92 million. So looking ahead to next year, the state has been saying they've been anticipating future deficits years out. We heard a lot about the conference in Albany about the unknown with respect to Hurricane Sandy and what kind of federal aid we'll be receiving. Cost increases, when we take a look, the benefits have been significant. The tax cap, and we'll get into this in more detail in January as we have more information regarding it. It's going to continue to limit our resources. And contingent budget rules are harmful. If you recall from last year, contingent budget for next year, if we were to go to that, the tax cap has to remain at the same level as this year. Dr. Powell's going to go over a survey that superintendents just took.
This will give you a little bit of a state perspective. This is the New York State Council of School Superintendents that conducted this online survey for the 2nd year now in a row.
They received 250 complete responses and approximately 50 partial responses. What this slide basically shows you is that even before the tax cap was in place, starting around 2005-06, districts across the state have begun to decrease their spending and their tax levy. Last year, the average increase in the budget to budget was 1.7%, and the average tax levy was 2.2%. But you can see that districts have been trying to make things more comfortable for the community in terms of the taxes they're being asked to pay by decreasing the expenses even before we were required to do the tax. 83 of superintendents who responded said that they are somewhat or very concerned about drawing upon reserves to offset costs, the operating costs. 49% of those were very concerned, 34 somewhat concerned. And essentially this is a situation that we all face. There are basically three things that a district can do. They can draw on their reserves. We've been fortunate enough to have reserves. There are some districts that have nothing to draw on. We can cut programs, or we can ask the taxpayers to contribute more. Essentially, those are our three options in terms of any kind of real adjustment to the budget. We said for years that the large percentage of school spending goes to personnel. So if 3/4 of the budget is personnel driven, then if you want to cut the budget, 3/4 of your cuts have to be personnel driven as well. Especially even as other districts have as well, kind of taking the low-lying fruit over the years in terms of busy things and some savings here and there, eliminating the dialogue, trying to send out fewer letters, send the report cards home with students. Those are all small changes that we've made, but you get to a point where those little changes don't add up enough anymore, and you really, as you saw this year, cutting into personnel. The survey also asked about other actions that districts have been taking in order to reduce budget, and some of the highlights include the following. 34% said they cut sports and other extracurricular activities this year, and over 50% of them said they had done the same last year. 40% deferred maintenance, over half did last year. Over 40% cut professional development at a time when we just heard tonight. I mean, it's kind of auspicious that these two presentations coincided. It wasn't actually planned that way initially, but the two actually support each other somewhat. They're cutting professional development when all of these changes are coming down mandated by the state, and we probably need it more than ever. 49% of districts with at least 5,000 students reported closing a school in the last 3 years. Again, another coincidence here in terms of the two reports coinciding. 90% of the superintendents say that the new evaluation requirements will require additional spending, and you can see that 70% said significantly increased spending, while 20% said somewhat increased spending. And that includes things like staff training, purchase of tests, purchase of materials to support it. For example, whether we chose one version of the Danielson rubric for the teachers or another, there was a cost involved. In one, we had to pay to purchase the online system that we would have used to conduct the evaluations and observations. In the other, we had to purchase the books that went with the framework in order to have the access that we needed to the program. So even choosing the rubric was not free. Of course, there's the substitute coverage for the training and things like that as well. If you look, we, of course, are in the Mid-Hudson Valley. This gives you a picture of how the
the superintendents rated their own particular district's financial condition. Happily, only 7% of us in the Mid-Hudson said financial condition was poor or very poor. 53% said worse than a year ago. 33% indicated that they felt that their reserves were less than adequately funded. And 73%, as you saw before, was kind of an average about the percentage of people who rely on reserves to control the tax levy. And here again is another implication that's more of a time implication, and as several people said, something else has to go. Sometimes John talked about Common Core not getting the attention it needed because of the APPR. But this survey showed that 41% of superintendents believe that the new APPR will require more than 40% of a principal's time. And they've been talking about, cutting administrators, while at the same time that the state is adding responsibilities. Another example is the bullying law that they can do for all students. So Michelle will take it back for a bit, and then I'll be back to finish up.
Moving over to our Spackenkill data, what I did was we went back and took a look at where we've been from the 2008 current school year up to the present to talk about where we've been. We'll look at some of our revenues, what we've been budgeting in the past versus our actual revenues. Same comparison with our expenditures. I want to look at where our revenue and expenditures are comparing in relation to each other each year. We put together some major expenditure categories, and they are from our annual financial report that we're required to file with the state. So the areas are areas that the state makes us report on. We'll talk a little bit more about state aid and our reliance on that, and then some fund balance and revenues. The first thing that we took a look at is going back to 2008 and 9, our major categories that are as a percentage of our budget. So the very top line you'll see is instruction, and that's reported district by district by the same codes and everything is the same. Instruction went from 2008, 2009 up through this year's budget in 2013 from 59% of the budget down to 56%. The next line down, you'll see an increase. This is the benefits, undistributed it's called. It includes pensions, health insurance, debt service. This is the only area that increased, and that went from 22.5% up to 25%. The third line down, the line below that, is our general support, and that includes finance, facilities and operations, our insurances, our BOSI's costs, and that also decreased from 11.8% up to 10.3%. The bottom line shows our transportation costs over a same period of time. And transportation costs went from 4% of the budget down to 3.4%, and that was a result of eliminating 2 bus runs over the last 2 years. The next thing, the slide takes a look at our revenues versus actuals. And this is going back to 2007-8 school year. And you'll see at the bottom of the slide in 7-8, in each of these years, our actual revenues came in higher than we budgeted. So we're budgeting conservatively for revenues. But you'll see back in 2007-8, we received about 105% of what we budgeted. Now we've gotten more and more conservative because we're uncertain of what will be out with the state, and we're trying to budget more appropriately. And for the past school year, our revenues came in at 101.5% of what we budgeted. So we're budgeting much closely on each side in order to be realistic. On the expenditure side, all the actuals were below budget. This will grow closer as we are budgeting closer. What we've been doing in order to generate some fund balance, that we'll talk about in a few minutes, is we've done some cost-saving initiatives that we hadn't budgeted for in the beginning of the year. We've cut off purchasing earlier. We've put more areas out to bid. So you'll see that we're budgeting for last year was about 95% of expenditures. And we'll talk about when we're presenting it in January where we think we're going to be at the end of 12-13. The next couple slides are going to go over employee benefits. The top piece is our health insurance, And then we'll talk about the retirement systems, and then at the bottom, you'll see the very bottom line is our workers' comp, and that hasn't had quite a big increase, but these other areas have. And the first one that we'd like to talk about is the employees' retirement system. And although we started out with $200,000, this has had a huge impact on budgeting. We're supposed to get some kind of mandate relief from the property tax cap, but it really hasn't come out the way that it was kind of presented to us with the 2%, anything over 2%. If we go back to 2002, 2003, we were paying less than 1% of teacher salaries, of the employee salaries for this benefit. In 2013-14, it's expected that that rate is going to increase to 20.9%, almost 21% of salaries, and that's from 18.9%. I looked at a study that was done regarding this, and for next year it's a 1% increase. But the study that I looked back to 2002, 2003, and with an employee making $25,000 a year. They gave them a 3% increase each year, and then applied whatever the applicable employees' retirement system rates were for that year. The increase over that period of time was 1,134% between the salary and the benefits combined. So this is an area of concern that while we have control over our salaries, we do not have control over the percentage that's going to be put forth. The next area was the teacher's retirement system. And again, going back to 2002, 2003, we were only paying a third of a percent, 0.36%. 2013-14, the estimate right now is between 15.5% and 16.5% of salaries. If we went back and did a similar analysis from 2002-2003, with someone starting at $50,000 a year with a 3% increase, it's going up 2,216% since that period of time. In the last 5 years, we've had a 35% increase in this line item. Health insurance, we've had a 39% increase over the last 5 years. Last year, the increase was 7.21% overall. We have been members of a consortium which has been rolling out new products and new plans. One of our latest contracts that we settled we received a 10% decrease in some of our contribution rates for people moving to another plan. So we continue to look for ways to do that, and also for increased contributions from employees. The next part goes back to our administrative and central services area, and you can see in all these areas, Board of Education, central administration, finance, central services, special items, such as insurances and building administration, that we've seen increases or flat areas as a percentage of our budget. So we've been trying to maintain the line on that. The next area shows our actual revenues and expenditures. So the good part about this slide is the revenues have been higher than the expenditures coming in. But you'll see that we've kept it about even going up as the budget went up. And as you'll see, if we project and we go out further, you're going to see that that line is going to become closer and closer together as we have to tighten up our budgets. So what we did is, looking at where we've been with our revenues in 2008, 2009, you'll see the top line is our tax levy, which has been increasing. As we discussed earlier, our state aid, which is the second line, has been decreasing. Other general fund revenues, our interest earnings, and the BOCES aid that we get comes in as pretty flat. And the bottom line shows the increase in the appropriate fund balance that we started to use back in after the 2009-10 school year. So taking this where we've been, I made some assumptions to show what the impact would be on our reserves. If our state aid remained the same, we had no decreases or no increases. If our other revenues, the pilot payment, which we know is guaranteed for 10 years, remains the same, interest earnings, and then if we took the tax levy and said we'll have a 2.2% increase over the next several years, and our budget's going up, say, 3.2% over the next several years, we take a look, Nancy, and we'll see where we go. You'll see the tax levy goes up. The next line, which is our state aid, stays flat. And then you'll see the large jump in general fund revenue going out. That was for the first year of the tax pilot, and then it stays flat. The very bottom line is the one to be concerned about, which is our appropriated fund balance. So that would show you that we would be up to over $6 million from the 2.3 where we are right now in a very short period of time. So if we were to take that same piece and look at it, you'll see the top line is our line going down, left to right on the top, is our unappropriated fund balance. The other line, I'm sorry, that would be our reserves. The next line down is our appropriated fund balance. And you'll see we'd still be left with our unappropriated fund balance, which is the 4% we're required to by law. But taking a look at this, if we were to just do nothing but start to use some reserves in a pretty conservative model, we'd be using half of our reserves over the next 4 years. Okay? So really what we have to do is try and do a combination of both, as the superintendent said, the 3 options. We need to cut some services, we need to look at our reserves, but we need to keep continuing to look at them. We need to keep coming back in January. Here's where our fund balance is, here's where we are with budget, and look 3 and 4 years out at what the impact of some of our decisions are going to be right now.
And to continue with the moving forward look, we continue to request mandate relief. Ironically, as we request mandate relief, nothing gets cut, but APPR gets added, core curriculum gets added, testing gets added. So it hasn't been working, but this is something that essentially we can all do, and the community could certainly help in terms of writing to legislators in support of mandate relief. We can seek alternate funding sources. The problem with that is that because we're not a high poverty district, we really don't qualify for most of the grants that are available. And when we do qualify for a grant, it's usually a small amount of, $2,500 to $5,000, and not something that is going to really make a huge difference in the program. As Michelle said, we try to look ahead to anticipate future problems, keeping an eye on the revenue as well as upcoming costs as best as we can predict them. Try to minimize the negative impact of cuts so that we can try to maybe change the way a service is provided rather than eliminate it. While we are still kind of questionable about maybe how well the summer program worked, that's an example of how we reduced cost and continue to provide some service. And next month we'll be looking at some options for providing the summer program in different ways. It's important to continue preventative maintenance because if you let buildings go for 5 to 10 years, you end up, having to spend a lot more in the end than if you fix things along the way. Not to mention safety concerns, certainly when you're dealing with human beings being in the buildings. We need to manage the reserves and fund balance, again, Michelle talked to that. Continue the long-range forecasting as best as possible, with it being December and the state not telling us yet what our actual state aid is for this school year. That's not always easy to do. And then continue to look for ways to save costs. And then essentially, this is our calendar for the upcoming months. The next board meeting, we will be given the rollover budget presentation, which is essentially where we say if we add nothing and cut nothing, what would the budget look like in terms of budget-to-budget increase and tax levy increase. We would continue the budget discussion at subsequent board meetings with the budget presentation, the recommended budget being presented to the board March 19th, budget adoption April 8th, budget hearing May 6th, and the budget vote May 21st. Questions?
I have a question, I'm just not sure what it is. I would have thought the fund balance would have gone up significantly too, because the other 2 lines had crossed. Why would that fund balance on the bottom stay relatively stable? Because I would think we have to maintain that rate based on those assumptions, we have to continually add more to the fund balance.
Right, so Nancy, can you go back a couple slides just so I can, Lois took my water, so I was trying to hurry through this. But I was getting parched, so I was trying to finish up. All right, so if you look at this slide again, like we said in the scenario, the budget's only gonna go up 2%, state aid's gonna come in, or the budget's gonna go up 3%. So the top line, top left to bottom right, is our reserves. So as we're using more fund balance, because we're not generating enough revenue to cover where we're going with the budget. The levy can only go up X amount, but the budget's going up higher than the levy. That appropriated fund balance keeps going up, and we're deeping into our reserves. So by 2017, our reserves will be about half of where they were. The bottom line is the unappropriated fund balance, which is the 4% that we're able to keep, and that 4% goes up a tiny bit each year as the budget goes up.
Got it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anyone else?
I have a few questions. One thing I wanted to mention too is that, maybe you can explain this a little more, there's also a cap on the amount of state aid as well, right?
How much can I say to
The state has capped the amount of aid they will give to school districts.
Right.
How it's distributed is a three-person vote decision. In all.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get clarification on, was how that works exactly. But-
3 people in Albany go to a room, and whoever wins the tug of war decides who gets what to what district.
Yeah, that's true. They have capped their state aid, and that is an issue I know school boards and several other agencies are not happy about. But unfortunately, this year, you might not even get to that amount because of Sandy and the fact that I've heard things that they may not increase state aid at all.
Right, because last year we got the maximum amount.
But we did, and they still continue with the gap elimination adjustment, which they took 1.3 million away from us. But they told us it was an increase because the year before they took away 1.42.